You ever notice how the quiet old men are usually the ones everybody should leave alone? The desert wind rolled across Highway 68 in long dry waves, pushing dust over the cracked asphalt and rattling the faded gas station sign beside Rustler's Diner. It was almost sunset in western Arizona, the kind of copper-colored evening that made old chrome glow like fire. A line of motorcycles sat parked outside beneath the neon beer signs, their engines ticking softly as heat bled from polished metal. Inside the diner, the air smelled like black coffee, grilled onions, and motor oil carried in from the road. Country music hummed low from an old jukebox near the back wall, while truckers and locals kept mostly to themselves in worn vinyl booths. Then the front door opened, and the entire room shifted without realizing it. Walter Hayes stepped inside slowly, leaning on a steel cane polished smooth from years of use. He looked about 78, maybe older under the dim yellow lights. White hair tucked beneath a faded navy cap. Denim jacket sun-bleached, almost gray. One pant leg hung slightly stiff around the prosthetic underneath. He moved carefully, but not weakly, like every step had already been measured before he took it. Nobody paid much attention at first. Just another old veteran drifting through another desert highway town. Walter nodded once toward the waitress behind the counter. Megan Doyle recognized him immediately. He came in every Thursday at almost the exact same time. Always black coffee. Always booth 6 beside the window. Always silent. "Evening, Walter," she said softly. Walter answered with the smallest nod and crossed the diner floor while his cane clicked against the checkered tile. Click. Step. Click. Step. Quiet rhythm. Calm rhythm. But the men gathered near the motorcycles by the front windows noticed him now. 5 bikers. Leather cuts. Dusty boots. Loud voices that carried too easily in small places. Their leader sat turned sideways in his booth, tattooed arms folded across his chest, beard thick and dark against a weathered face. Travis Cole, 30-something, built like somebody who spent most of his life testing boundaries just to see which ones broke first. He watched Walter limp past and smirked into his beer bottle. "Hell," Travis muttered loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Looks like Grandpa forgot bingo night." A couple of the bikers laughed. Not hard, just enough. Walter kept walking. Didn't look at them. Didn't react. That seemed to irritate Travis more than if he had argued back. Megan felt it immediately. That dangerous shift men like Travis carried when silence bruised their ego worse than insults ever could. Walter lowered himself carefully into booth 6 beside the window. Outside, the sunset burned across the desert horizon in deep orange streaks. Dust drifted across the gas pumps. Somewhere far off, a freight train horn echoed through the empty land. Walter wrapped both hands around the coffee mug Megan placed in front of him, letting the steam rise into the hard lines of his face. Then Travis stood up, boots scraping against the floor loud enough to kill every conversation left in the diner. "Hey, old-timer," he called out, walking slowly toward booth 6. "Didn't your nursing home tell you not to wander off alone?" More laughter now, sharper this time, the kind that wanted an audience. Walter looked out the window instead of answering. His pale blue eyes reflected the dying desert light like cold glass. Travis stopped beside the booth and glanced down at the steel cane resting against the table. "Damn," he chuckled. "That thing military issue too." One of the bikers snorted into his drink. Another shook his head grinning. Walter finally turned slightly toward him. Calm. Measured. "Just trying to enjoy my coffee, son." The word son landed wrong. Travis's smile faded a little. Something ugly flickered behind his eyes. Outside, the wind picked up harder now, rattling the diner windows. The American flag near the gas pumps snapped sharply in the desert air. Then Travis nudged the cane lightly with his boot. Not enough to hurt, just enough to disrespect. The steel cane tipped sideways and clattered across the diner floor with a loud metallic crack that silenced the entire room. The sound of the cane hitting the floor seemed to hang in the diner long after the echo died away. Nobody moved at first. Not the trucker near the pie counter. Not the older couple beside the window. Even the waitress station went still beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. Travis looked down at the steel cane lying across the black and white tile and smirked like he had just won something important. "Oops," he said, spreading his hands slightly. "Guess it slipped." One of the bikers laughed too loudly behind him. Another took a drink and shook his head with the lazy confidence of men who believe the room belonged to them. Walter never answered. He stared quietly at the fallen cane for a moment while steam curled from the untouched coffee in front of him. Then slowly, carefully, he leaned forward in the booth. The movement looked difficult, not dramatic, just honest. The kind of movement age demanded payment for. His right hand pressed against the table edge while he reached down with the other toward the cane. The prosthetic under his jeans shifted stiffly. Megan took one step from behind the counter before stopping herself. She could feel the tension spreading through the diner like heat before a storm. Travis watched Walter struggle for those few seconds and smiled faintly, feeding on the silence around him. "Maybe you ought to stay home if standing up is that hard," he muttered. Walter finally wrapped his fingers around the steel cane and pulled it upright again. The polished handle caught the orange sunset shining through the diner windows. He settled back into the booth slowly, breathing steady, face unreadable. Then he looked at Travis for the first time since the cane fell. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. "You done?" Walter asked quietly. The question should have ended it. Any decent man would have heard the warning hidden inside the calmness of that voice. But Travis Cole had spent too many years mistaking restraint for weakness. He leaned one hand against the booth and lowered himself closer to Walter's eye level. The smell of gasoline and cigarette smoke drifted off his leather jacket. "See, that is what I do not get about you old military guys," Travis said. "You walk around expecting everybody to treat you like heroes forever." Walter said nothing. Outside, a pickup truck rolled past the gas station pumps while dust swirled through the fading desert light. Somewhere near the kitchen, silverware clinked softly as a nervous busboy pretended to work. Travis glanced toward Walter's faded navy cap. "My old man served too," he continued. "Know what it got him? A busted back and a divorce." He shrugged coldly. Nobody rolled out a parade for him. Walter's eyes drifted toward the diner window again. "Then I am sorry for your father," he said softly. That answer hit Travis harder than an insult would have. Megan saw it immediately. The biker leader's jaw tightened. His pride wanted a fight, but Walter refused to give him one. That calmness unsettled him more every second. One of the bikers noticed the old canvas bag resting beside Walter in the booth. "Hey, Travis," he called out. "Check out the old man's purse." Laughter rolled through the group again. Travis reached down before Walter could stop him and grabbed the faded canvas bag by its strap. Walter's hand moved slightly, then stopped. Just one small motion. Controlled. Deliberate. Travis held the bag up like a trophy while the zipper rattled open. Inside were only a few things. Reading glasses. A folded road map. An old paperback novel with worn corners. And stitched near the inner flap, faded almost gray with age, was a small military patch. A gold trident beneath an eagle. Barely visible now beneath cracked thread and desert dust. Travis squinted at it. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked with a crooked grin. "Discount Boy Scouts." Walter's voice came lower this time. Still calm, but heavier somehow. "Give me the bag back, son." The diner went completely silent again. Because this time, even the bikers could hear it. Something had changed in the old man's voice. Travis stared at Walter for another second before smirking again and lifting the faded canvas bag higher into the air. "Hear that?" he called over his shoulder to the other bikers. "Grandpa wants his treasure back." Chuckles rolled through the diner, but weaker now. Uneasier. The patch hanging half exposed inside the bag caught the glow of the neon beer sign above the counter. Faded gold thread. An eagle. A trident. Strange markings nearly worn away by time. One of the younger bikers squinted toward it. "Looks military," he muttered. Travis shrugged. Everything looks military at a surplus store. He hooked 2 fingers inside the bag and pulled the patch loose enough for everyone nearby to see. The old stitching stretched, but held. Walter's eyes followed the movement carefully. Not panic. Not fear. Something deeper than that. The kind of attention people gave fragile things that mattered more than money ever could. "You know what I think?" Travis said loudly. "I think guys like this love pretending they were something special back in the day." He glanced around the diner for approval. Every town has one. Some old-timer wearing fake war stories like Halloween costumes. Nobody answered him. Outside, headlights rolled past the diner windows in long streaks across the darkening desert highway. Megan stood frozen behind the counter, gripping the coffee pot too tightly. Her father had been a marine mechanic before cancer took him. She remembered old stories whispered late at night after too much whiskey and too many memories. Stories about men who never spoke loudly because they did not need to. Men with old eyes and calm voices and strange patches nobody was supposed to ask about. Her gaze locked onto the trident patch in Travis's hand. Something about it bothered her immediately, not because she recognized it exactly, because she almost did. Travis turned the patch over in his fingers carelessly. No unit number, he scoffed. No flag. Half the stitching is gone. He looked down at Walter again. What is this? Some fantasy camp nonsense. Walter sat perfectly still in booth 6. The steam from his coffee had almost disappeared now. That patch belonged to men who earned it, he said quietly. Travis laughed. Sure they did. Then he made the mistake. He tapped one finger directly against the faded trident. The diner disappeared for Walter Hayes in a single heartbeat. The soft country music vanished. The smell of coffee vanished. Suddenly the world became black ocean water beneath moonlight. Rotor blades thundered overhead so hard they shook his teeth. Salt. Spray hammered his face while freezing wind ripped through the open helicopter door. He was young again, 23 years old. Muscles burning. Hands slick with seawater and diesel fuel. Somewhere below, waves crashed against sharp volcanic rock. A voice screamed through static in his headset. Hayes, we are out of time. Another voice. Younger. Panicked. Movement on the ridge. Walter remembered the cold weight of suppressed steel in his hands. Remembered the dark outline of a teammate slipping near the extraction rope. Remembered reaching out and catching him before the ocean swallowed him whole. The trident patch had been sewn onto soaked gear under red emergency lighting that same night, while the helicopter screamed through storm clouds toward a carrier group that officially did not exist. No medals. No photographs. No parade waiting at home. Just 5 exhausted men staring silently at one another while seawater dripped onto the steel deck beneath their boots. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. Walter blinked once and found himself back inside the diner. Travis was still standing there grinning with the patch hanging from his fingers. But Walter's pale blue eyes had changed now. Not harder. Older somehow. Heavy with ghosts. Last chance, Walter said softly. Give me the bag back. Even Travis hesitated this time. Only for half a second. But Megan saw it. The biker leader could feel it now too. Something in that old man's voice did not sound weak anymore. It sounded dangerous in a way loud men never understood until it was too late. The air inside Rustler's diner felt heavier now, like the whole building had sunk under invisible pressure. Nobody touched their food anymore. Forks rested motionless beside half-eaten burgers. Coffee cooled untouched in thick ceramic mugs. Even the jukebox near the bathrooms seemed quieter beneath the low rattle of desert wind against the windows. Travis looked down at Walter Hayes and forced another grin onto his face, but it no longer reached his eyes. Men like Travis survived by controlling rooms, by staying louder than everyone else, stronger than everyone else. But the old man sitting calmly in booth 6 had done something far worse than threaten him. He had made the room stop believing in him. Travis tossed the canvas bag onto the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. You know what your problem is? He said. You think people still care about whatever happened 50 years ago. Walter reached slowly for the bag, his movements careful and precise. He checked the faded trident patch first before sliding the strap quietly back beside him. The relief in his eyes lasted only half a second, but Megan noticed it. So did Travis. That patch means a lot to you, huh? Travis asked. Walter rested one weathered hand over the bag. It belongs to men who never came home. The answer landed differently than everything else he had said. Quiet. Flat. Honest. One of the younger bikers shifted uncomfortably in his booth and looked away toward the gas pumps outside. The sunset had almost disappeared now. Long shadows stretched across the diner floor, while headlights from passing trucks flashed through the windows in brief streaks of white and red. Travis leaned closer again, lowering his voice. You trying to scare me with old war stories? Walter met his eyes. No, just one word. Calm as stone. Megan suddenly remembered something her father once told her when she was 13 years old. They had been sitting on the back porch during a thunderstorm while he cleaned old tools from his garage. He had looked at her very seriously and said, The dangerous ones are never loud, Meg. The real ones already know what they can do. She looked back at Walter now and felt cold move slowly through her stomach. Travis turned toward his friends with another forced laugh. Guy acts like he was James Bond or something. One biker chuckled weakly. Another stayed silent. The mood had shifted too far now for easy laughter. Travis grabbed his beer bottle from the table and pointed it loosely toward Walter. So what were you then, he asked. Navy cook? Supply clerk? Walter's eyes drifted briefly toward the diner window again. Far beyond the highway, dark mountains sat against the fading sky like giant shadows. Long time ago, he said quietly. Different world. Travis rolled his eyes. Yeah? Well, this world says you do not get special treatment just because you are old. Walter nodded once. You are right. That answer caught Travis off guard again. No anger. No pride. No argument. Just agreement. Somehow that felt worse. Megan wiped her hands nervously on her apron and glanced toward the office near the kitchen. Her father's old words kept echoing in her head. Dangerous ones are never loud. She looked back at the faded trident patch resting near Walter's hand. Then at the old Navy cap. Then at the way Walter sat perfectly still while 5 younger men slowly lost control of the room around him without understanding why. Finally, Megan stepped quietly behind the counter and reached for the cordless phone hanging near the register. Her pulse hammered inside her chest while she dialed a number she had not called in almost 2 years. The line rang once, twice. Then a tired male voice answered over background radio chatter. Naval Operations Desk. Petty Officer Ramirez speaking. Megan lowered her voice immediately. Hi, I am sorry to bother you, but I think something bad is about to happen out here. Silence crackled softly through the line for a moment. Ma'am, Ramirez said carefully, what exactly is this regarding? Megan glanced across the diner toward Walter Hayes sitting alone in booth 6 beneath the dying Arizona sunlight. Then she looked at the faded trident patch resting beside his coffee cup. I think, she whispered slowly, there is an old Navy man here that somebody should probably know about. The fluorescent lights above the diner counter buzzed softly, while Megan Doyle stood half-hidden beside the register with the cordless phone pressed tightly against her ear. Outside, the Arizona sky had gone dark blue beyond the gas station canopy, and the desert wind carried dust across the empty highway in thin, twisting sheets. Ma'am, Petty Officer Ramirez repeated carefully through the line. What exactly did you say the patch looked like? Megan glanced toward booth 6 again. Walter Hayes sat motionless beside the window, one hand resting calmly near the faded trident patch on his canvas bag, while Travis Cole remained standing over him with the restless energy of a man trying to prove something to himself more than anyone else. Gold trident, Megan whispered. Old stitching, worn almost gray. She swallowed nervously, and the old man said it belonged to men who never came home. Silence answered her this time. Not confusion, not boredom. Silence. Then faint keyboard sounds crackled through the phone speaker. Fast typing. Somebody speaking quietly in the background. Ramirez came back on the line, but his tone had changed completely now. Sharper. Controlled. What is the man's name? Megan hesitated. Walter Hayes. Another silence. Longer this time. Somewhere through the receiver, she heard a chair scrape violently against a hard floor. Then another voice entered the background. Older. Colder. Repeat that name. Ramirez answered somebody off the phone immediately. Walter Hayes, sir. The diner suddenly felt very small around Megan. She looked toward Walter again. The old man simply sat there beneath the neon beer signs with steam fading from his untouched coffee while 5 bikers slowly lost control of a situation they still thought belonged to them. Travis leaned both hands against the booth now. You know what your problem is, old man? He asked. You keep talking like anybody owes you respect. Walter looked up at him quietly. Nobody owes anybody respect, he said. But decent people usually give it anyway. One of the bikers muttered something under his breath. Another looked toward the diner door like he suddenly wanted fresh air. The atmosphere inside the room had shifted into something uncomfortable and heavy, like thunder waiting behind distant mountains. Megan tightened her grip on the phone. Ma'am, Ramirez said again, voice lower now, listen carefully. Is Mr. Hayes in danger? She glanced toward Travis, toward the beer bottle in his hand, toward the mocking grin that no longer looked as confident as before. I think he might be, she answered honestly. More muffled voices exploded through the line. Orders now. Movement. Fast movement. Then the older voice returned directly onto the call for the first time. Calm. Deep. Dangerous. This is Commander Nathan Cross. I need you to answer very carefully. Is Walter Hayes alone? Megan blinked. The name hit her harder than she expected. Even she knew who Navy SEAL commanders were. The fact that one had joined the call personally made cold pressure build in her chest. Yes, sir, she said quickly. He is alone. A pause. Then only one question came back through the phone. Has anyone touched him? Megan looked across the diner just as Travis reached down again and grabbed the old canvas bag from the table edge. Walter's hand tightened slightly against the coffee mug for the first time all night. Barely noticeable, but enough. Yes, sir, Megan whispered. The silence on the line became absolute. No background noise. No typing. Nothing. Then Commander Cross spoke again, each word clipped and precise like steel locking into place. Listen to me carefully. Do not let him leave that diner. Megan felt her pulse hammering in her throat. Sir, who is he? Another pause. Long enough to feel deliberate. Then the commander answered quietly. One of ours. The line disconnected immediately afterward. Megan lowered the cordless phone slowly while her stomach twisted tighter by the second. Outside, far down the highway, faint headlights appeared against the darkness. 3 sets. Moving fast. The 3 sets of headlights grew larger against the dark Arizona highway while Rustler's Diner sat trapped in a strange, tightening silence. Inside, nobody laughed anymore. The bikers still occupied their booth near the front windows, but their earlier swagger had started to crack around the edges. Men who spent their lives reading danger could feel when the air changed, even if they did not understand why. Travis Cole grabbed his beer again and took a long drink, eyes never leaving Walter Hayes across booth 6. You got friends coming or something? He asked finally. Walter rested both hands around the cooling coffee mug. No, he answered quietly. Not anymore. The answer should have sounded sad. Instead it sounded final. Outside, the wind carried dry leaves skittering across the parking lot beneath the gas station lights. The motorcycles lined beside the curb gleamed under neon reflections while diesel engines hummed faintly from trucks passing on Highway 68. Megan Doyle stepped out from behind the counter pretending to refill sugar dispensers just so she could get closer to Walter's booth. Her pulse still hammered from the phone call. One of ours. The words kept echoing inside her head. Travis noticed her moving around the room nervously and smirked. What is wrong, sweetheart? He asked loudly. Old man got you scared. Megan ignored him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Walter instead. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before. The old scar running along his jawline beneath the diner lights. The weathered hands resting calmly near the patch. The way he constantly watched reflections in the window instead of turning his head fully toward sounds behind him. Habit. Training. Years buried too deep to disappear. Walter caught her looking and gave the slightest shake of his head, almost like he already knew what she had done. Travis leaned back against the booth and laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. You know, he said, I still think this whole thing is hilarious. Bunch of people acting like some old cripple is dangerous. Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke softly enough that everyone had to lean slightly closer to hear him. Being dangerous is easy. The diner stayed silent. Walter's pale blue eyes drifted toward the dark highway beyond the glass. Living with it afterward is the hard part. Nobody answered him. One biker slowly lowered his beer bottle onto the table. Another glanced nervously toward the diner entrance. The confidence that had carried them earlier was fading now beneath something they could not explain. Then the first black SUV flew past the diner windows. Fast. Too fast for a small desert town. Its headlights flashed across the room like lightning before disappearing down the highway. Travis frowned. State police, one biker muttered. 30 seconds later, a second vehicle appeared. Black. Government plates. Moving hard through the darkness. Then another behind it. All heading the same direction. Megan felt the blood drain from her face. Walter never reacted at all. He simply sat there quietly while steam no longer rose from the untouched coffee beside his hand. Travis straightened slowly away from the booth now. What the hell is going on? He asked, though nobody in the diner answered. Far in the distance, another sound rolled through the desert night. Low at first, barely noticeable beneath the wind. Then deeper, rhythmic, rotor blades. Every head inside the diner turned instinctively toward the windows. Somewhere beyond the dark highway, A helicopter moved across the Arizona sky with slow pulsing lights cutting through the darkness. Travis forced a laugh again. "No way," he muttered. But his voice had lost all confidence now. Walter finally reached for his coffee cup and took a small sip. Calm, measured, the same way he had done everything all evening. Then he looked at Travis one final time. "You should leave," he said quietly. Nobody in the diner mistook it for a threat. Somehow that made it much worse, because it sounded like genuine advice. Travis Cole stood motionless beside Booth 6 while the sound of rotor blades rolled across the Arizona desert like distant thunder. The confidence that had filled Rustler's diner earlier was gone now, drained out of the room one uneasy second at a time. Outside the front windows, headlights swept across the gas pumps again. Another black SUV. Then another farther down the highway shoulder, slowing near the diner entrance. Nobody inside spoke. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. The cook stood frozen near the grill with a spatula hanging loosely in one hand, while truckers near the counter pretended not to stare. Walter Hayes remained seated beside the window, one hand resting calmly on the faded canvas bag, pale blue eyes reflecting the flashing lights outside. Megan Doyle moved slowly toward booth 6, carrying the coffee pot, even though nobody needed a refill. It gave her something to do with shaking hands. "Sir," she whispered carefully as she reached Walter's table, "I think maybe you should go out the back." Walter looked up at her. There was no fear in his face, no urgency, only exhaustion buried deep beneath years of discipline. "No," he said quietly. "They already drove too far." Megan swallowed hard. The helicopter sound grew. Louder overhead now, slow and deliberate somewhere beyond the dark mountains surrounding the highway. Travis glanced toward the diner windows again before looking back at Walter. "Who are you?" he asked finally. The question came out rougher than he intended. Not mocking anymore. Honest. Walter studied him for a moment. Then he gave the smallest shrug. "Just an old man trying to drink his coffee." One biker muttered nervously from the booth near the entrance. "Travis, maybe we should roll out." Travis ignored him. Pride still fought inside him, even while instinct screamed something was wrong. "No," he said quietly without looking away from Walter. "I want answers." Walter's gaze drifted toward the dark window again, where flashing reflections from approaching vehicles painted streaks of red and white across the glass. "Sometimes," he said softly, "answers cost more than people expect." The first SUV finally turned into the diner parking lot. Gravel crackled loudly beneath heavy tires. Every person inside turned toward the windows at once. The vehicle was matte black. No markings. No logos. Just dark government plates and headlights cutting through blowing desert dust. A second SUV followed behind it with perfect spacing. Then a third. The engines idled low and powerful beneath the gas station lights. Nobody exited immediately. That somehow felt worse. Travis took one slow step backward away from Walter's booth. The biker nearest the front door stood up completely now. "Man," he whispered, "who the hell did we mess with?" Walter said nothing. Outside, the helicopter sound deepened overhead before drifting farther east beyond the highway. Then all three SUV doors opened at once. Men stepped out wearing dark tactical jackets over civilian clothes. Clean movements. Controlled movements. Not rushed. Not dramatic. The kind of men who never needed to prove they belonged anywhere. Boots crunched softly against gravel as they crossed the parking lot beneath the gas station lights. One man moved slightly ahead of the others. Tall, broad shoulders, short gray at the temples, calm face carved from years of command decisions and sleepless nights. Commander Nathan Cross. Travis did not know his name, but every instinct inside him recognized authority the second he saw it. Nobody inside the diner breathed when the front door finally opened. Cold desert air swept through the room, carrying dust and jet fuel with it. The men entered silently. Their eyes moved across the room once. Fast. Professional. Every biker froze where they stood. Commander Cross never looked at them. Not even once. His attention locked entirely onto Walter Hayes sitting quietly beside booth 6 with one hand resting on the faded trident patch. For the first time all evening, Walter slowly pushed himself to his feet. The steel cane touched the tile floor with a soft metallic click. Commander Cross stopped 3 feet away from him. The diner became so silent, even the buzzing neon signs sounded loud now. Then the commander straightened fully and rendered the sharpest salute anyone in that diner had ever seen. Commander Nathan Cross held the salute without moving while the cold desert wind drifted through the open diner door behind him. Every man who had entered with him stood perfectly still in the background, silent shadows beneath the neon lights and buzzing ceiling fans. Nobody touched anything. Nobody spoke. Rustler's Diner had gone beyond quiet now. It felt sacred somehow. Walter Hayes looked at the commander for a long moment before slowly returning the salute with the hand that was not gripping his steel cane. Age had stiffened the movement, but not diminished it. The second Walter's hand reached his brow, every operator behind Commander Cross snapped into salute at the exact same moment. Boots locked, faces forward. Perfect discipline. Travis Cole stared at the scene in complete disbelief. 1 minute earlier, he had been mocking an old disabled veteran over cold coffee and faded patches. Now armed men who carried themselves like military ghosts stood frozen in absolute respect around that same old man. One of the bikers quietly whispered, "Oh my God." Commander Cross lowered his salute first. His expression remained calm, but something deep and personal moved behind his eyes as he looked at Walter. "Sir," he said quietly, "we have been trying to find you. For almost 15 years. Walter lowered his own hand slowly. "I was not hiding," he answered. "Maybe not," Cross replied softly. "But men like you usually disappear anyway." Nobody inside the diner understood the full meaning of those words except the operators standing near the entrance. Travis finally found his voice again. "What is this?" he asked, though it came out weaker than intended. Commander Cross turned his head slightly for the first time all night. His eyes settled on Travis with calm precision. Not anger, not intimidation, something colder than both. Professional assessment. The kind of look that measured people in seconds. "You touched his patch?" Cross asked. Travis swallowed hard before answering. "I did not know who he was." "No," Cross said quietly. "You did not." Walter stepped slightly forward before the silence could tighten any further. "Commander," he said, voice low with exhaustion, "that is enough." Cross immediately looked back toward him. "Sir, with respect, it is not enough." The older man shook his head once. It was a diner argument. Nothing more. One of the operators standing near the door shifted slightly at those words, almost unable to believe them. Travis heard it too. The old man he had mocked for the last half hour was now calming down the men who had arrived for him. Megan Doyle watched the entire scene with wide eyes behind the counter. She noticed something then that made the moment feel even heavier. Every operator who entered the diner carried the same faded trident symbol somewhere on their gear. Some stitched inside jacket collars. Some engraved onto watches. One operator even had it tattooed faintly along his wrist beneath rolled sleeves. The same symbol Travis had laughed at minutes earlier. Commander Cross reached slowly into his jacket pocket and removed a small, weathered photograph folded at the corners from years of handling. He held it carefully toward Walter. "We found this in the archives last winter," he said. Walter accepted the photograph with slightly trembling fingers. The entire diner remained silent while he looked down at it beneath the neon glow. 5 young men stood on the deck of a carrier under. Storm clouds beside a military helicopter. Wet uniforms. Exhausted faces. One of them was a much younger Walter Hayes. Beside him stood a younger Nathan Cross barely out of his 20s. Walter stared at the image for several seconds before giving the smallest tired smile anyone had seen from him all night. "You kept this?" he asked quietly. Cross nodded once. "You carried me onto that helicopter in the Philippine Sea after our extraction went bad," he said. "I figured the least I could do was keep one photograph." Travis slowly stepped backward now, every ounce of arrogance gone from his face. He looked toward Walter again, but this time there was no mockery left. Only realization. Because for the first time all night, he finally understood something terrifying. The quiet old man sitting alone in booth 6 had never been powerless. He had simply chosen not to use the weight of who he was. The desert wind pushed softly against the diner windows while nobody inside moved or spoke. Rustler's Diner no longer felt like a roadside stop on Highway 68. It felt like the center of something older, heavier. The operators remained standing in silent formation near the entrance while Commander Nathan Cross faced Walter Hayes beneath the pale neon lights. Outside, the black SUVs idled quietly beside rows of motorcycles that suddenly looked very small beneath the cold Arizona night. Walter continued staring at the old photograph in his hand for another moment before carefully folding it again along the worn crease lines. You kept everybody alive that night, Cross said softly. Most men would have asked for medals after what happened in the Philippine Sea. Walter slipped the photograph gently back toward the commander. Medals would have meant paperwork, he answered. Paperwork would have meant questions. A few of the operators exchanged the faintest smiles at that. Travis Cole listened in complete silence now, all traces of arrogance stripped away. The old veteran he had mocked over coffee and faded patches had once operated in places important enough to stay hidden for decades. And somehow that realization frightened him more than any threat ever could. Walter reached slowly for the canvas bag resting beside the booth and adjusted the worn strap over one shoulder. The steel cane clicked softly against the tile as he prepared to leave. Commander Cross immediately stepped forward slightly. "Sir," he said, "we can take you home." Walter looked toward the diner windows where dust still drifted through the gas station lights outside. "No," he answered gently. "I drove myself here. I can still drive myself home." Cross hesitated. "At least let us escort you." Walter gave the faintest tired smile. "Nathan," he said quietly, "if 6 SEAL operators escort me through a town this small, people are going to start asking exactly the kind of questions we spent 40 years avoiding." Even Commander Cross laughed softly at that. The tension finally eased inside the diner for the first time all evening. Megan Doyle stepped quietly from behind the counter, holding a fresh cup of coffee wrapped carefully in a to-go carrier. Her hand still trembled slightly as she approached Walter. "For the road," she said. Walter accepted it gently. "Thank you, ma'am." Megan swallowed hard before speaking again. "My father was a Marine," she said softly. "He used to talk about men like you." Walter shook his head slowly. "No," he answered. "Men like me are the reason men like your father had to carry heavy things home." Megan did not know how to answer that. Neither did anyone else. Travis finally stepped forward from near the biker booth, every eye in the diner following him immediately. He looked completely different now, smaller somehow, humbled beneath the weight of understanding. "Sir," he said quietly toward Walter, "I was out of line." The room stayed silent while Walter studied him. Then the old veteran nodded once. "Yeah," he answered calmly. "You were." Travis lowered his eyes briefly. "I am sorry." Walter looked at him for another second before adjusting the strap of the canvas bag higher onto his shoulder. "Then do better next time," he said. No speech, no anger, no humiliation, just simple truth delivered quietly. Somehow that hit harder than anything else could have. Commander Cross stepped aside as Walter slowly made his way toward the diner. Entrance. Every operator in the room instinctively moved with him, creating a silent corridor all the way to the door. Boots remained still, faces forward, respect without performance. Walter paused once beneath the buzzing neon sign near the exit and looked back across the diner. Truckers, locals, nervous bikers, a frightened waitress, young operators standing silently beneath fluorescent lights. Ordinary people frozen around a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Then Walter Hayes gave the smallest nod and stepped out into the cold desert night. The wind caught his denim jacket as he crossed the parking lot alone beneath the gas station lights. Behind him, every Navy SEAL in the diner remained standing in complete silence until the old pickup truck disappeared down Highway 68 into the darkness. Because some men leave the battlefield long before the world notices they were ever there at all.